I'm guessing when they look at the Soviet Union, they realize it ultimately failed because of economic reasons. I mean, that is what kind of brought it down in the end. And they're probably making sure that doesn't happen to them.
Yeah, and that, that's a big question, because obviously China has grown economically. They like to focus on GDP, gross domestic product, which is, an indicator, but it doesn't necessarily say how the people on the bottom are living. Right. And they don't really want you to assess that, because a lot of people are left behind in the countryside. It's more the coasts and the cities that are doing well. But the other question is, as power is centralized in China, can you really manage this vast population, 1.2 billion people, through increasingly the decisions of one man, Xi Jinping? This is how mistakes are made. And China has benefited so far through urbanization, which has boosted the economy, through the hard work of the Chinese people, through global trade in cheap goods, and also through massive borrowing and these infrastructure projects that borrowing permits. And it's not clear that they can continue. They may be bumping into the end of this. They have an aging economy. The urbanization has largely happened now. They're trying to move to a kind of a higher category of goods, which you tend to need more freedom of thought and exchanges to succeed in. That's not the Chinese style. So they are, it's not clear they're going to be able to maintain this growth rate. But Xi Jinping is terrified of this, because if they can't keep borrowing, if there's something that's a limit to mounting debt, are they going to can sustain the 6% growth rate?
Right.
And if they can't, do the Chinese people start saying, well, wait a minute, I thought the deal was, we keep getting richer and therefore we delegate all our governance authority to you, but you're not keeping your end of the deal. So that's what terrifies them.
Right, which means he's out of a job, maybe communism is out of a job, maybe it turns into chaotic capitalism, who knows?
Yeah, who knows? Well, and if you look at Hong Kong, part of why they're so fearful of Hong Kong is because, these are Chinese people after all. And, the people of Hong Kong have gotten exercised because they were supposed to have the benefits of the one country, two systems agreement that Britain negotiated with Beijing when they handed over Hong Kong. And Beijing is gradually whittling away at that agreement. So the protests were actually launched because Hong Kong wanted to adopt an extradition law that would permit Hong Kong Chinese to be sent to the mainland where there is no due process, there is no judicial independence. People went crazy. This would just shut down the freedoms in Hong Kong because anybody could be arrested and brought across the way. So, these are Chinese people who want their freedoms.
Yeah.
And that's a terrifying thought to Xi Jinping.
I'm impressed how hard they protest. They really believe in this.
Yes, and it's been, now over 6 months.
Yeah.
And they still periodically can turn out, hundreds of thousands of people. And so...
because they know what's happening in China, and they know how bad it can get.
They totally know.
And they're willing to risk their lives for these protests.
Yeah, it's very impressive how deeply the Hong Kong people want their political freedoms.
Yeah, very much. Yeah. Because these are people that are well off, that have potential good futures, that might be able to leave the country, and that they're really willing to sit there and fight for that city-state. It's impressive.
It's very impressive.
And it must drive the Chinese government crazy, because every protest is a symbol, to the rest of the country that something's not right, and that people want their freedoms.
Yeah. Now, the irony is, this World Report that I described, which was focusing on China's kind of global threat to human rights, I was going to release that at a press conference in Hong Kong.
When was this? A year ago?
No, this was 3 weeks ago.
3 weeks ago.
Yes.
Oh, wow.
And I'd done, less than 2 years ago, I'd done a press conference in Hong Kong releasing another Human Rights Watch report on gender discrimination in the job market in China. And it was completely uneventful. I held it at the Foreign Correspondents Club. I went around the city talking to journalists, no big deal. It was a free city. And I flew back this time and they blocked me at the airport. And they just were too afraid at this stage to allow this to go forward. And they totally shot themselves in the foot, because their blocking me was this huge media event. And so I just went back to New York. It was like a long weekend of flying Cathay Pacific.
What does that feel like when you get blocked? Does it feel a little weird, scary?
Not scary, no. I wasn't fearful for myself, but it was
They didn't put you in a
disappointing.
room or anything?
Well, no, I did. I went up to the immigration officer. My name immediately popped up in the computer. They put me on some alert. He filled out a restricted form, And they sent me into a back room. And so during my 4.5 hours, I was basically guarded by 3 immigration officers. I was given this kind of perfunctory interrogation. And then, they told me they were sending me back. And so it was...
Sounds a little scary.
Well, it's funny. I at first asked...
Can you record that? Is there anything you can do for your own safety?
Well, I had my phone.
Okay.
So I was in touch with colleagues. So I wasn't really worried. They weren't going to do anything to me. But I asked 2 things. I said, so who's making this decision? Hong Kong or Beijing? And they said, oh, Hong Kong. But the next morning, Beijing punctured that cover story by kind of admitting that they had made the decision. At first I said, well, so why am I being sent back? And all they would say is immigration reasons. I couldn't get past that. But then there were sort of these series of explanations that were offered. The first one was that, I was inciting the Hong Kong protests, as if the people of Hong Kong need me to tell them to defend their democracy, or as if I have the capacity to mobilize 1 million people in the streets of Hong Kong. So that was a little odd. And then we went back to New York and held a press conference at the United Nations, which, because of what China had just done to me in Hong Kong, was like a big publicity thing for the release. So every journalist in New York showed up, and it was this massive thing. But a Chinese diplomat showed up too. And the Chinese mission in New York, they never talked to the media. So the journalists were thrilled that this guy shows up. So we handed him the microphone. And he explained then that, the reason they blocked me was first because I was not giving them enough credit for the progress they'd made. And, of course, I asked, which progress is this? The 1 million detained in Xinjiang, or the suppression of the Hong Kong protesters, or, but that was a separate issue. But then kind of the truth came out. And if you look at what you just said today at this press conference, where I described this Chinese threat, that's why we blocked you. So it was just, it's just censorship.
So they need some PR help a little bit.
But But the one thing I did, which is sort of almost a tribute to Ai Weiwei, come back to him. But my staff wanted me to do a selfie video as while I was in Hong Kong.
Yeah, I saw it.
And but I was guarded the whole time, so I really couldn't do it. And they were putting me back on the plane, and they were actually holding the plane. I was the last person to get on the plane. And so I said, as I was sort of right in the gateway, I need a moment of privacy. And so they said, okay, and they backed off. And so I pulled out my phone and did this 1 minute, 1 take selfie video, which, it is what it is. But then the most stressful part was trying to send it, because I had a kind of a loaner phone, which was not working very well. It would connect to the terminal Wi-Fi. It wouldn't connect to the phone system. And I was losing the terminal Wi-Fi as I walked down the gateway. And so I was trying to send this selfie, watching the bar move slowly along. And I wasn't sure if it was sent, and it was and I was slow walking my way down the gateway, and they're trying to push me along because the plane is waiting. And, finally it made it. But that was the most stressful part. Do I get this thing out? And that stupid video has now been seen by 430,000 people. It was retweeted on my Twitter account, I think 14.5 thousand times.
It's amazing because it's real, and it was in the moment. It's how you felt, and and that's a little Ai Weiwei tribute as well.
Yeah, so it was, but that was sort of the somewhat funny part of the whole thing.
Wow.